Well, good morning. It's good to be with you on this Monday morning as we begin our last chapter in James. I talked to several folks yesterday at church who were commenting on how much they enjoyed James, and I do as well. It's just from top to bottom one of my favorite books in the whole Bible, just because it's so practical. We were talking in Sunday school about sometimes how one of the struggles we face with Scripture sometimes is where do we apply metaphor versus allegory? Where do we take things exactly literally? It's always a challenge with Scripture sometimes, particularly when you get to a more confusing book like Revelation, which is what we've been studying in Sunday school for what seems like a million years now. Um, so when you get to James, he's just like, hey, stop being dumb. You show me your faith, I'll show you my works, and we'll see where we stand. So I love the practical aspect of James. So let's read chapter 5 today. We're going to read chapter 5, 1 through 6. Chapter 5, 1 through 6. Come now, you rich people, and weep and wail for the miseries that are coming to you. Your riches are rotted, your clothes are moth-eaten. Your gold and your silver have rusted, and their rust will be evidence against you, and it will eat your flesh like fire. You have laid up treasure for your last day, for the last days. Listen, the wages of the laborers who mowed your field, which you kept back by fraud, cry out, and the cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord of hosts. You have lived on earth in luxury and pleasure, and you have fattened your hearts in the day of slaughter. You have condemned and murdered the righteous one who does not resist you. So, what feels like 100 years ago when I was in seminary, we had to do a large exegetical paper. And an exegetical paper is a paper where basically you look at the text through all the lenses of interpretation. Historical interpretation, critical interpretation, you're looking at the type of literature it was. What does that mean? You're looking at the historical context of what the writer was writing about, and also the historical context of what the author was, what the audience was hearing. It's pretty in-depth and intensive paper. Of course, when you're a seminary, it is not. Now when you've been out for a while, it's basically just sermon prep. That's what it kind of is. I may not write a paper every week, but I do that type of research every week dealing with my sermon. And I'm telling you that to say that this was my passage that I used for my exegetical paper my big paper when I was in seminary was this specific passage out of James. I still remember a lot of it, but particularly the one that always reminds me is that last verse. You have condemned and murdered the righteous one who does not resist you. James, when writing that, that's actually an allusion to how the powers that be in the religious world of Jesus' day murdered him. And they, so in some ways, this passage here is a critique not just of the wealthy and the church of James's day, but it was a critique of how Jesus was treated when he was here upon the earth. And so many things here have specific meanings or references to that. And it's the he's going to show how the things they find in life are evidence of God's judgment. So your clothes are moth-eaten. Um, your your silver has rusted, and the rust will be evidence against you, and it will eat your flesh like fire. You have laid up treasure for the last days. Listen, the wages of those who mowed your field cry out. Almost has a an Egyptian Exodus feel, doesn't it? This feels like the Exodus where the slaves cried out for justice to God, and God heard their cries. And here we see James saying, you have withheld payment. You have not taken care of those who work for you. You have lived here in luxury and in pleasure, and have fatted your heart on the day of slaughter. You've condemned and murdered. Um, Friends, Scripture, James, we don't have an excuse for how we treat each other. particularly those of us that have power, those of us that are in positions of power, we cannot be blameless if we use our power to hurt others. That's what's happened here. And of course, let's let's unpack where James is coming from. Remember, most Christians in James' day were poor. In fact, if you go back and read earlier, chapter 2, where he warns against partiality, he says, when someone rich comes into your assembly, he says, verse 6, this is chapter 2, verse 6. But you have dishonored the poor. Is it not the rich who oppress you? Is it not they who drag you in the court? Is it not they who blaspheme the excellent name that was invoked over you? It's easy for us to read this passage as critique of us, particularly those that have wealth. For James's context, he's writing on behalf of the church that's poor. Because chapter 2, he says, hey, these rich that you're being not these rich that when you get in the good seats, aren't they the ones throwing you into prison? Aren't they the ones who are mistreating you? We see here, you who are wealthy weep and wail. Your riches have rotted. You have not paid the laborers. You have not paid these people. They have cried out to you. So this is not, in James's context, this is not so much a judgment of within the church for the wealthy church members. This is more a judgment outside because the church is poor. And this is a judgment to those who are not helping the Christians and who are oppressing and hurting the Christians. And so I think it's important for us to know where James is coming from, to understand what's happening there, but let it be a warning to us as well. Because if we're going to be honest, most of us find ourselves more in the position of the rich outside the church than we do of the poor inside the church. And so I think the question then becomes for us is how do we use what God's given us? How do we use it's very easy to use it metaphorically. How do you use the riches of talent God's given you? How do you use the riches of presence? And about those things are true. God's gifted us with talent and abilities. And sure, we should definitely ask ourselves, how are we using these things? But to be true to the text here, it's talking about resources. It's talking about wealth. It's talking about these things. So the question we have to ask ourselves is how do we, particularly those of us who have a lot, how do we use what we have? And not only are the people here in this text not using what they have to help others, they're using what they have to actively harm others. And are we using one of Wesley's first rules is first do no harm. If we can't do something right, you don't do something bad. That's a good first step. Not doing bad is a good start because if we can avoid doing evil, it's a good start. So for those of us that have, how do we use what we have? Do we do we give? Do we use our abilities? Do we use our assets? Do we use our resources? Do we use what God has gifted us with to help those in need? Because here we see that if not, you have lived on the earth in luxury and pleasure, and have fatted your hearts on the day of slaughter. You have condemned and murdered the righteous one who does not resist you. The Lord sees what we do. And we talked yesterday in worship about how the Lord loves us and He forgives us and He wants us to live in victory and live free from the weight of sin. But we need to also be aware of, we need to be reflective on what we have, reflective on what God's given us, and reflective on how we use what God has given you. In the church, that word stewardship. Are we being good stewards of what God has given us? So I would encourage us all to look at what we have, look at what God has blessed us with, and ask ourselves, are we being the best stewards of what God has given us that we can possibly be? So may we all show good stewardship with the blessings that God has given us today. So it's a great challenge for us to ponder and to think through as we think through this book of James. So, Thanks for being with us. This is one of the more challenging passages in James. So let's all be good stewards, no matter where we are. Hey, have a great day.